The transport shuttle shuddered as it docked with the mining station orbiting Kepler 442b. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the small porthole, watching the massive structure grow larger. The station looked like a metal spider, with dozens of arms reaching into space. Each arm held mining equipment that could strip asteroids bare in hours. Sarah pulled her worn jacket tighter around her small frame. At 5 feet 2 inches and barely 100 pounds, she looked like a strong wind could blow her away. Her black hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her brown eyes seemed too big for her thin face. The other passengers on the shuttle had ignored her completely during the 3-day journey. "All passengers prepare for docking," announced the pilot. His voice crackled through the old speakers. "Welcome to Mining Station Omega 7. Population 12,000. Try not to die." The pilot thought he was funny. Sarah had heard worse jokes in worse places. The airlock opened with a hiss of recycled air. Sarah grabbed her small duffel bag and followed the other passengers into the station. The main corridor was wide enough for cargo haulers to pass through. Overhead lights cast harsh shadows on the metal walls. Everything smelled of oil, sweat, and something Sarah couldn't identify but didn't like. "Fresh meat!" someone called out. Sarah looked up to see a group of miners watching the new arrivals. They wore the standard blue coveralls of the mining corporation. Their faces were dirty, and their eyes were hungry. Not for food. "Look at that little thing," one of them said, pointing at Sarah. "Bet she won't last a week." Sarah kept walking. She had learned long ago that responding to comments like that only made things worse. Better to stay quiet and let people think what they wanted to think. The employment office was located 3 levels down from the docking bay. Sarah took the stairs instead of the elevator. Elevators were small spaces where bad things could happen. Stairs gave her room to move if she needed to. The employment clerk was a thin man with pale skin and nervous eyes. He looked at Sarah's application without really seeing her. "Sarah Chen," he read aloud. "Age 23. No previous mining experience. No mechanical training, no heavy equipment certification." He looked up at her. "What exactly can you do?" "General labor," Sarah said. "I'm stronger than I look." The clerk laughed. "Honey, this isn't a job for little girls. This is hard work. Dangerous work. Men die here every month." "I need the job," Sarah said simply. The clerk shrugged. "Your funeral. Report to Supervisor Martinez in Section C7 tomorrow at 600 hours. Starting pay is 200 credits per week. Housing is provided, meals are extra." He handed her a key card. "Dormitory level 5, room 247. Try not to get yourself killed on the first day." Sarah took the key card and left. The dormitory was exactly what she expected. Narrow corridors lined with small rooms. Each room had a bed, a locker, and a tiny bathroom. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbors breathing. She unpacked her few belongings. 3 changes of clothes, a small toolkit, a data pad with some books loaded on it, and hidden in the bottom of the bag, wrapped in an old shirt, was something the employment clerk definitely didn't need to know about. That night, Sarah lay in bed listening to the sounds of the station, the constant hum of the air recyclers, the distant clang of machinery, voices in the corridor outside her room. Some of the voices belonged to women, but most belonged to men. This was a man's world, they would tell her, a place where the strong survived and the weak got crushed. They had no idea how wrong they were. The next morning, Sarah reported to Section C7 at exactly 600 hours. Supervisor Martinez was a stocky man with gray hair and scars on his hands. He looked Sarah up and down with obvious disapproval. "You're the new girl," he said. "Chen, right?" "Yes, sir." "I told them I didn't want any more girls in my section," Martinez said. "Too much trouble, too much drama." "But they sent you anyway." He pointed to a pile of metal pipes near the wall. "Move those pipes to Storage Bay 3, all of them, by yourself." Sarah looked at the pipes. There were at least 50 of them. each one about 8 feet long and weighing maybe 40 pounds. It would take her hours to move them all. "Is there a cart I can use?" she asked. Martinez smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Carts are for people who can't handle real work. You wanted a job here, girl. This is your job." The other workers in the section had stopped what they were doing to watch. Sarah could feel their eyes on her. Some looked amused. Others looked sorry for her. A few looked like they were waiting for her to cry or quit. Sarah walked over to the pipes and picked up the first one. It was heavier than she had expected, but not impossible to carry. She hefted it onto her shoulder and walked toward Storage Bay 3. The bay was about 200 meters away down a long corridor. It took her 4 hours to move all the pipes. By the time she finished, her coveralls were soaked with sweat and her hands were raw from the rough metal, but she had moved every single pipe without complaining once. Martinez watched her carry the last pipe into the storage bay. His expression had changed from amusement to something like respect. "Not bad for a little girl," he said when she returned. "Take a break. Report back here in an hour." Sarah found a quiet corner and sat down with a bottle of water. Her muscles ached, but it was good pain, the kind that meant she was getting stronger. Around her, the other workers went about their business. A few of them nodded at her as they passed. The rest still ignored her. That was fine. Sarah preferred to be ignored. After her break, Martinez assigned her to help with routine maintenance in the mining bay. The work involved crawling through tight spaces to check cables and replace worn parts. It was dirty, uncomfortable work that required someone small enough to fit into spaces designed for maintenance robots. "Perfect job for the little girl," said a miner named Frank. He was tall and broad with arms like tree trunks. "Finally found something she's good for." Sarah didn't respond. She just crawled into the maintenance shaft and got to work. The space was barely wide enough for her shoulders. The cables were old, and some of them sparked when she touched them. The air was hot and stale. She worked steadily for 6 hours, checking every connection and replacing 3 burned-out components. When she finally crawled out of the shaft, she was covered in grease and dust, but the job was done. Martinez checked her work with a handheld scanner. "All green," he said, sounding surprised. "Good work, Chen." The first week passed slowly. Sarah did whatever jobs Martinez gave her without complaint, moving heavy equipment, cleaning storage bays, crawling through maintenance shafts that full-grown men couldn't fit into. The work was hard and dirty, but she had done worse. The other workers began to accept her presence, if not her as a person. They called her Little Chen and made jokes about her size, but the jokes weren't cruel anymore. She was pulling her weight, which was all that mattered in a place like this. But not everyone was willing to accept her. On Friday night, Sarah was walking back to her dormitory when 3 men stepped out of an alcove. She recognized them from the employment office, the ones who had called her fresh meat. "Well, well," said the largest one. His name was Jake Morrison, and he worked in the refinery section. "Look who's still here." Sarah stopped walking. The corridor was empty except for the 4 of them. The nearest security camera was 50 meters away, and it was pointed in the wrong direction. "I'm just going to my room," Sarah said quietly. "Not so fast, little girl," said Jake. He stepped closer. "Me and my friends have been watching you this week. Working real hard, aren't you? Trying to prove you belong here." "I do belong here," Sarah said. Jake laughed. "No, you don't. This is a man's world, little girl." "And you know what happens to little girls in a man's world?" The other 2 men spread out to block any escape route. Sarah's heart rate increased, but not from fear, from anticipation. She had been waiting for this moment since she arrived at the station. "Please," she said, making her voice small and scared. "I don't want any trouble." "Too late for that," Jake said. He reached for her. Sarah let him get close. Let him think she was helpless and afraid. Let him believe he was in control. Then she moved. Sarah's left hand shot out and grabbed Jake's wrist. Her right hand drove upward in a short, vicious punch that caught him in the throat. Jake made a choking sound and stumbled backward, but Sarah wasn't done with him. She pivoted on her left foot and drove her right knee into Jake's solar plexus. The big man doubled over, gasping for air. Sarah brought her right elbow down on the back of his neck, and Jake collapsed to the deck like a felled tree. The whole thing took maybe 3 seconds. The other 2 men stared at their unconscious friend in shock. Sarah turned to face them, and they saw something in her eyes that made them take a step backward. "Anyone else want to try?" Sarah asked. Her voice was calm and steady. The 2 men looked at each other, then at Jake, then at Sarah. Without a word, they turned and ran. Sarah knelt beside Jake and checked his pulse. He was breathing and his heartbeat was strong. He would wake up in a few minutes with a headache and bruised ego, but no permanent damage. She stood up and continued walking to her dormitory. Behind her, Jake groaned and slowly began to wake up. Word of the fight spread through the station within hours. By the next morning, everyone knew that the little new girl had put Jake Morrison in the medical bay with a concussion. The story grew in the telling, as stories always did. Some said she had used a weapon. Others claimed she knew some kind of alien martial art. A few insisted it had been pure luck, that Jake must have slipped and hit his head. But the men who worked with Sarah every day saw the truth in her eyes. Little Chen wasn't as helpless as she looked. Martinez called her into his office that Monday morning. He gestured for her to sit down, then studied her for a long moment. "Jake Morrison is claiming you attacked him without provocation," Martinez said. "Is that what he's claiming?" Sarah asked. "That's what he's claiming, but Jake's got 2 friends who say different. They say he started it. They say you finished it." Martinez leaned back in his chair. "Want to tell me what really happened?" Sarah considered her options. She could tell the truth and probably get kicked off the station. She could lie and probably get kicked off the station. Or she could say nothing and see what happened. "Jake and his friends approached me in the corridor," she said finally. "I felt threatened. I defended myself." "With what? A pipe wrench?" "With my hands." Martinez was quiet for a long time. Then he opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out a data pad. He turned it so Sarah could see the screen. "This is your employment application," he said. "Says here you have no military experience, no combat training, no martial arts background." He looked at her. "Is that true?" Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "That's what the application says." "Funny thing," Martinez continued. "I did some checking after the fight. Turns out there's no record of a Sarah Chen matching your description in any of the corporate databases. No work history, no educational records, no family connections." He leaned forward. "It's like you didn't exist until you walked onto this station." Sarah said nothing. "Now, I don't much care who you used to be or what you used to do," Martinez said. "What I care about is whether you can do the job I'm paying you to do. And so far, you've done every job I've given you without complaining once." He closed the data pad. "Jake Morrison is a bully and a troublemaker. Always has been. If he picked a fight with the wrong person, that's his problem, not mine." Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. "So I can stay?" "You can stay," Martinez confirmed. "But Chen? Try to keep the violence to a minimum. The corporation doesn't like paperwork." Over the next few weeks, life on the station settled into a routine. Sarah worked her assigned shifts, kept to herself, and avoided trouble. The other workers treated her with a mixture of respect and curiosity. None of them bothered her. Jake Morrison transferred to a different section. He claimed it was for better pay, but everyone knew the real reason. He couldn't stand working in the same area as the little girl who had embarrassed him. Sarah didn't mind. The fewer problems she had, the better. But problems had a way of finding her whether she wanted them or not. It started with the accident in Mining Bay 7. A cable snapped while a team was moving a load of processed ore. The cable whipped across the bay and struck a worker named Tommy Gutierrez in the chest. Tommy was rushed to the medical bay with internal injuries. The accident investigation revealed that the cable had been deliberately weakened. Someone had made precise cuts in the metal strands, cuts that would be invisible to casual inspection but would cause the cable to fail under stress. It was sabotage. Station Security Chief Reynolds called a general assembly. All 12,000 workers crowded into the main auditorium to hear what he had to say. "Someone on this station is deliberately sabotaging our equipment," Reynolds announced. "This is not just an attack on the corporation. This is an attack on every one of you. When our equipment fails, people get hurt. People die." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sabotage was serious business. In the dangerous environment of a mining station, equipment failure could kill dozens of people in minutes. "We're implementing new security measures immediately," Reynolds continued. "All workers will be subject to random searches. All tools and equipment will be logged and tracked. Anyone found with unauthorized modifications to station equipment will be arrested and charged with attempted murder." Sarah listened to the announcement with growing unease. Random searches meant her room could be searched at any time. And hidden in her duffel bag was something that definitely qualified as an unauthorized modification. That night, she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about her options. She could try to hide her equipment somewhere else on the station, but that was risky. She could throw it out an airlock, but that would leave her defenseless if she needed it. Or she could trust that no one would look too closely at what appeared to be an ordinary toolkit. The next morning brought news of another sabotage incident. This time, someone had tampered with the atmospheric controls in Section D. The oxygen levels had dropped to dangerous levels before the automated safety systems kicked in. No one was seriously hurt, but it could have been much worse. Reynolds increased security again. Armed guards began patrolling the corridors. Workers were required to show identification at checkpoints. The mood on the station grew tense and suspicious. Sarah kept her head down and did her work. She had survived worse situations by being invisible and unimportant. The key was not to do anything that drew attention, but sometimes attention found you anyway. She was working alone in a maintenance tunnel when she heard voices in the corridor outside. Two men talking in low, urgent tones. "The next one has to be bigger," one of them said. "Something that will really get their attention." "What about the reactor cooling system?" asked the other voice. "If that goes down, they'll have to evacuate the whole station." "Perfect. Do it tomorrow during the shift change. Maximum chaos." Sarah froze. They were talking about sabotaging the reactor cooling system. If that system failed, the nuclear reactor would overheat. The safety systems would trigger an emergency shutdown, but the heat buildup could crack the reactor housing. The radiation release would make the entire station uninhabitable. 12,000 people would die. The voices moved away down the corridor. Sarah waited until she was sure they were gone, then crawled out of the maintenance tunnel. She had to report what she had heard to Security Chief Reynolds, but when she reached the security office, Reynolds wasn't there. The desk officer told her the chief was investigating another sabotage incident in the outer ring. He wouldn't be back for hours. Sarah left a message, but she knew it might be too late. The saboteurs planned to act during tomorrow's shift change. That was less than 18 hours away. She went back to her room and sat on her bed, thinking. She could try to stop the sabotage herself, but that would mean revealing skills she had spent months hiding. It would raise questions she couldn't answer. On the other hand, 12,000 innocent people would die if she did nothing. It wasn't really a choice at all. Sarah opened her duffel bag and pulled out the bundle wrapped in the old shirt. Inside was something that looked like an ordinary tablet computer. But hidden beneath the standard interface was software that could hack into any system on the station. She had been Jessica Hayes once, Captain Jessica Hayes of Earth Defense Force Special Operations. the best electronic warfare specialist in the service. She had infiltrated enemy installations, sabotaged alien technology, and fought in battles that officially never happened. But that was a long time ago. That was before the mission that went wrong, before her team was betrayed, before she had to disappear and become someone else. Sarah Chen was supposed to be invisible. She was supposed to be safe. But sometimes being safe wasn't enough. She activated the tablet and began to work. Sarah's fingers moved across the tablet's surface with practiced precision. The device connected wirelessly to the station's network through hidden access points she had identified during her weeks of careful observation. To anyone watching, she appeared to be reading a book on her datapad. The station's security system was impressive for a mining operation, but it was built to keep pirates and thieves out, not to stop someone with her training. Within minutes, she had access to the maintenance schedules, personnel records, and security camera feeds. She started with the voices she had overheard. Both men had spoken with distinct accents. One had a slight lisp, the other rolled his R sounds. Sarah cross-referenced the audio patterns with personnel files and came up with 2 matches. David Kowalski, 43 years old, worked in the reactor maintenance division. His file showed 3 reprimands for safety violations and a note about alcohol problems. The other voice belonged to Marcus Webb, 36 years old, an electrical systems technician. Webb had gambling debts that exceeded his annual salary. Sarah dug deeper into their records. Both men had access to critical systems. Both had financial problems. Both had been working extra shifts in sensitive areas over the past month. She found what she was looking for in the maintenance logs. Kowalski and Webb had been working together on routine inspections of the reactor cooling system. They had identified several areas where improvements could be made. Their recommendations had been approved and scheduled for implementation. Tomorrow, during the shift change, they would have legitimate access to the reactor cooling system. They would enter the restricted area with proper authorization and all the tools they needed, and they would sabotage the system in a way that would look like an accident. Sarah checked the current status of the cooling system. Everything appeared normal, but she noticed something odd. The system was running at 98% efficiency instead of the usual 99.5%. Someone had already made preliminary modifications. She needed to see the cooling system for herself. The reactor level was the most secure area on the station. Guards checked identification at multiple checkpoints. Security cameras monitored every corridor. Electronic sensors tracked everyone who entered or left the area. But Sarah had spent years infiltrating secure facilities. She knew that every security system had weaknesses if you knew where to look. She waited until the night shift began, then made her way to the maintenance levels below the reactor. The corridors here were narrow and poorly lit. Most workers avoided this area because the radiation shielding made everything feel oppressive and claustrophobic. Sarah found what she was looking for in sub-level 3, a maintenance shaft that connected to the reactor cooling system. The shaft was barely wide enough for a person to crawl through, and it was marked with radiation warnings. Perfect. She changed into maintenance coveralls and grabbed a standard toolkit from a supply closet. Then she removed the access panel and crawled into the shaft. The shaft was hot and cramped. The walls were lined with cooling pipes that radiated heat even through the insulation. Sarah crawled forward slowly, following her tablet's display of the station's layout. After 20 minutes of crawling, she reached a junction where the shaft opened into a larger maintenance area. She was now inside the reactor's radiation shielding, in a space that technically didn't exist on any official blueprint. The cooling system's main pumps were directly above her. She could hear the steady thrum of machinery and feel the vibration through the deck plates. Sarah climbed up through another access panel and found herself in the cooling system's control room. The room was empty, as she had expected. During the night shift, the cooling system ran automatically. Human technicians only entered this area for maintenance or emergencies. Sarah approached the main control panel and connected her tablet to the diagnostic port. Within seconds, She had access to the system's operating parameters and maintenance logs. What she found made her blood run cold. Kowalski and Webb hadn't just planned to sabotage the cooling system. They had already begun. Over the past 2 weeks, they had made subtle modifications to the control software. They had adjusted pressure settings, modified temperature thresholds, and disabled several safety interlocks. The system was still operating normally, but it was balanced on a knife's edge. One more modification would trigger a cascade failure that would overwhelm the safety systems and cause a reactor meltdown. Sarah quickly copied all the evidence to her tablet, then began reversing the sabotage. She restored the original pressure settings and reactivated the disabled safety systems. But as she worked, she realized something that made her heart race. The modifications were too sophisticated for 2 maintenance workers to have created on their own. The code was elegant and precise, written by someone with advanced knowledge of reactor systems. Someone had been helping them. She dug deeper into the system logs and found traces of external access. Someone had been connecting to the reactor's control system from outside the station. The connection was routed through multiple proxy servers and encrypted with military-grade security protocols. This wasn't just sabotage. This was an attack by a professional team with significant resources and technical expertise. Sarah finished restoring the cooling system, then carefully retraced her path through the maintenance shafts. She needed to report what she had found to Security Chief Reynolds immediately. But when she reached her dormitory level, she found Reynolds waiting for her outside her room. "Miss Chen," he said, "I got your message about overhearing suspicious conversations. I wonder if we could talk." Sarah's mind raced. How long had he been waiting? Had he seen her coming from the restricted areas? "Of course," she said. "What would you like to know?" Reynolds gestured toward her room. "May we speak privately?" Sarah unlocked her door and led him inside. The room was small enough that both of them had to sit on the bed. Reynolds seemed to fill the entire space with his presence. "Tell me exactly what you heard," Reynolds said. Sarah repeated the conversation as accurately as she could remember. Reynolds listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a data pad. "You said one of them mentioned the reactor cooling system?" he asked when she finished. "Yes. They talked about doing something during tomorrow's shift change." Reynolds nodded grimly. "We've been investigating the sabotage incidents for weeks. This is the first real lead we've had." He studied Sarah's face carefully. "You're sure you didn't recognize the voices?" "I'm sure," Sarah lied. She couldn't reveal how she had identified the saboteurs without exposing her own activities. "And you didn't see who was speaking?" "No. I was in a maintenance tunnel. I could only hear voices in the corridor." Reynolds made another note. "Miss Chen, I have to ask. What were you doing in a maintenance tunnel at that time of night?" Sarah's pulse quickened, but she kept her expression calm. "Supervisor Martinez assigned me to check the cable runs in Section C. Some of the emergency lighting has been flickering. And that required you to work after your regular shift?" "I wanted to finish the job. The tunnels are cooler at night." Reynolds seemed to accept that explanation. "Well, thank you for reporting this. We'll increase security around the reactor area tomorrow." After he left, Sarah sat on her bed thinking about the implications. Reynolds was clearly investigating the sabotage seriously, but he didn't know about the external involvement. The people behind the attacks were still out there, and they would try again. She spent the rest of the night monitoring the station's communication systems. If the saboteurs were receiving orders from outside, they would need to report the failure of their mission. At 0347 hours, she found what she was looking for: a brief, encrypted transmission from the station to a location in deep space. The encryption was military-grade, but Sarah's software was designed to crack military encryption. The decoded message was short and chilling. "Primary target secured. Secondary objectives compromised. Request immediate extraction." Someone was coming to get the saboteurs. Sarah checked the station's sensor logs and found traces of a ship approaching from the outer system. It was moving slowly and using stealth technology to avoid detection, but the station's mining sensors were sensitive enough to pick up the gravitational disturbance. The ship would arrive in approximately 18 hours. Sarah realized she was facing a choice that would change everything. She could report what she had discovered to Reynolds and let station security handle the situation. But that would require explaining how she had obtained information that no ordinary maintenance worker could have accessed. Or she could handle the situation herself, using skills that Sarah Chen wasn't supposed to have. Either choice would expose her true identity and force her to abandon the quiet life she had built on the station. But if she did nothing, the saboteurs would escape and continue their attacks elsewhere. She thought about the 12,000 innocent people on the station. Workers like Tommy Gutierrez, who was still recovering from his injuries. People like Supervisor Martinez, who had given her a chance when no one else would. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Sarah opened her duffel bag and pulled out the rest of her hidden equipment. Beneath a false bottom were items that definitely didn't belong in a maintenance worker's toolkit. Military-grade communication devices, electronic warfare modules, weapons that could stop a human or an alien. She had hoped never to use them again. Captain Jessica Hayes had died in a classified mission 2 years ago. Sarah Chen was supposed to live quietly and safely, invisible among the thousands of workers who kept human civilization running, but sometimes the dead had to come back to life. The next morning, Sarah reported for her regular shift as if nothing had happened. She worked alongside her teammates, crawling through maintenance shafts and replacing worn components. To everyone around her, she appeared to be the same quiet, unremarkable worker she had been for months. But every few minutes, she checked her tablet for updates on the approaching ship. It was still 18 hours away, but its trajectory was becoming clearer. The ship would arrive during the next night shift, when the station's security was at its lightest. At lunchtime, Sarah excused herself and made her way to the communication center. The center was located near the station's command deck, in a restricted area that required special clearance to access. Sarah didn't have special clearance, but she had other ways of getting where she needed to go. She found a maintenance shaft that led to the communication center's backup power room. The room was filled with humming electrical equipment and was usually unoccupied. Sarah accessed the center's network through a diagnostic port and began uploading specialized software. The software was her own creation, designed during her years in special operations. It would monitor all communications to and from the station, looking for specific patterns that indicated hostile activity. More importantly, it would give her the ability to intercept and modify those communications. As she worked, she heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Someone was coming toward the power room. Sarah quickly finished her upload and disconnected her tablet just as the door opened. "Hey, what are you doing in here?" asked a technician Sarah didn't recognize. "Checking the backup power systems," Sarah said, holding up her toolkit. "Some of the equipment in Section C has been experiencing power fluctuations." The technician frowned. "This is a restricted area. You need special authorization to be here." Sarah showed him her maintenance worker identification. "Supervisor Martinez sent me. He said it was urgent." The technician checked his duty roster, then shrugged. "Okay, but next time make sure you log your presence with security." "Will do," Sarah said, and left quickly. That evening, Sarah monitored the communication systems from her room. She had identified the frequencies the saboteurs were using and was tracking all transmissions. At 2134 hours, she detected another encrypted message from the station. This one was longer than the previous transmission. When decoded, it read, "Extraction confirmed. Landing Bay 7, 0300 hours. Package ready for transport. Cleanup protocol approved." The saboteurs were planning to escape on the incoming ship, but the reference to cleanup protocol suggested they planned to destroy evidence of their activities. On a station like this, that probably meant eliminating witnesses. Sarah checked the personnel schedules and found that Security Chief Reynolds would be conducting a routine patrol of the outer sections at 0300 hours. If the saboteurs wanted to eliminate the person investigating their activities, that would be the perfect opportunity. She had to warn him, but she couldn't do it directly without revealing how she had obtained the information. Instead, she sent an anonymous message through the station's internal communications system. Check Landing Bay 7 at 0300 hours. Your life depends on it. Then she prepared for the confrontation she had been trying to avoid for 2 years. Sarah changed into dark clothing and gathered her equipment. The weapons she had hidden were compact but effective. A plasma pistol that could punch through body armor, concussion grenades that could disable multiple targets without causing permanent damage, electronic jammers that could disrupt enemy communications and sensors. She also carried items that were less obviously weapons, but equally useful. A maintenance scanner that could detect hidden electronics, a universal access device that could open any electronic lock on the station, medical supplies in case someone got hurt. At 0245 hours, Sarah made her way toward Landing Bay 7. The bay was located in the station's outer ring, far from the main population centers. It was used primarily for emergency evacuations and special cargo operations. The corridor leading to the bay was deserted. Sarah moved carefully, using her scanner to check for surveillance devices and hidden sensors. The saboteurs would be cautious, but they wouldn't expect opposition from someone like her. She reached a maintenance alcove near the bay entrance and settled in to wait. Through her scanner, she could detect 3 human life signs inside the bay. 2 were moving around actively, probably preparing for the ship's arrival. The third was stationary near the entrance. At exactly 0300 hours, Security Chief Reynolds appeared at the far end of the corridor. He was alone, which meant he had taken her warning seriously but hadn't called for backup. That was good news and bad news. Good because it meant fewer innocent people would be in danger. Bad because it meant he was walking into a trap with no support. Sarah watched Reynolds approach the bay entrance. The stationary life sign began moving toward the door. Someone was waiting in ambush. Reynolds reached for the door control, and Sarah made her decision. She triggered a small electrical overload in the corridor's lighting system. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the area into darkness. In the confusion, Sarah sprinted from her hiding place toward the bay entrance. The door slid open and a figure emerged, weapon in hand. Sarah hit him with a concussion grenade before he could react. The man dropped unconscious to the deck. "Reynolds!" "Get down!" Sarah shouted. The security chief dropped to the floor just as plasma bolts began firing from inside the bay. The shots went over his head and struck the corridor walls, leaving glowing scorch marks on the metal. Sarah rolled through the doorway and found cover behind a cargo container. Inside the bay, she could see 2 more figures taking position near the airlock. They were wearing environmental suits and carrying military-grade weapons. "This is Security Chief Reynolds," Reynolds called from the corridor. "You're surrounded. Surrender now and you won't be harmed." One of the figures laughed. "You think you can stop us with station security? We've been planning this for months." "David Kowalski," Sarah called out. "Marcus Webb, this is over. Your sabotage failed, and your extraction ship isn't coming." There was a moment of surprised silence. Then Kowalski's voice. "Who are you? How do you know our names?" "I know a lot of things," Sarah said. "I know you've been working for someone off-station. I know you planned to destroy the reactor cooling system. I know your contact promised you safe passage out of human space." "You don't know anything," Webb shouted, "and it doesn't matter. Our ship will be here any minute." Sarah checked her tablet. The approaching ship was still 6 hours away, but the saboteurs didn't know she had access to that information. "Your ship was intercepted by Earth Defense Force patrols," she lied. "They found your communication records. They know everything." That wasn't true, but it might make the saboteurs desperate enough to make mistakes. Kowalski and Webb began moving toward different positions in the bay. They were trying to flank her position, which meant they were trained for combat. Sarah adjusted her assessment of the threat level. "Reynolds," she called, "can you secure the corridor? Don't let anyone else get close." "Who are you?" Reynolds called back. "How do you know so much about this situation?" Sarah didn't answer. She was too busy tracking the two saboteurs as they moved through the bay. Her scanner showed them splitting up, one moving toward the cargo area and the other toward the control room. She needed to stop them before they reached their weapons, or triggered whatever backup plan they had prepared. Sarah activated her electronic jammer, flooding the bay with interference that would disrupt their communications and targeting systems. Then she moved quickly toward Kowalski's position. She found him crouched behind a stack of supply crates, trying to establish radio contact with someone. When he saw her approaching, he raised his plasma rifle and fired. Sarah dove to the side as the bolt seared past her head. She returned fire with her own weapon, forcing Kowalski to take cover. Then she tossed a concussion grenade over the crates. The explosion knocked Kowalski unconscious and sent equipment flying across the bay. Sarah zip-tied his hands and checked him for additional weapons. "Webb," she called, "your partner is down. Surrender now and this ends peacefully." Instead of surrendering, Webb opened fire from the control room. Plasma bolts filled the air as Sarah ran for cover. One of the shots came close enough to singe her hair. Sarah reached a cargo elevator and used it to reach the bay's upper level. From there, she could see into the control room where Webb was barricaded behind a console. "You can't stop this," Webb shouted. "Even if you kill us, there are others. The attacks will continue until humanity learns its place." Sarah frowned. Webb's words suggested this wasn't just about money or personal grievances. Someone was targeting human installations specifically. "Who's paying you?" she called. "The collective has been watching humanity for decades," Webb said. "You're too aggressive, too unpredictable. The galaxy will be safer when your species is contained to your own star system." The collective. Sarah had heard that name before in classified briefings during her time in special operations. An alliance of alien species that considered humanity a threat to galactic stability. "The collective tried diplomacy," Webb continued. "They tried economic pressure, nothing worked, so they decided to try a more direct approach." Sarah understood now. The sabotage attacks weren't random terrorism. They were part of a coordinated campaign to destabilize human space colonies and mining operations. If enough installations were destroyed or abandoned, humanity's expansion into space would slow or stop entirely. "You're working for aliens," she said, "helping them attack your own species." "I'm helping to prevent a galactic war," Webb replied. "Humanity needs to learn that it's not the dominant species in the universe." Sarah had heard enough. She activated a targeting laser on her plasma pistol and aimed it at the control room's main power coupling. One shot would disable the room's lighting and electronics, giving her the advantage she needed. But before she could fire, Webb made a crucial mistake. He stood up to get a better shot at her position, exposing himself for a critical second. Sarah's training took over. Her plasma bolt struck Webb in the shoulder, spinning him around and knocking him to the floor. He was injured but alive. She rappelled down to the control room and secured Webb with zip ties. He was conscious but in significant pain. "You don't understand what you've done," he gasped. "The collective won't stop. They'll send more operatives, more saboteurs." "Then we'll stop them too," Sarah said. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, weapon drawn. He looked around the bay in amazement, taking in the unconscious saboteurs and the evidence of the brief but intense firefight. "Who are you?" he asked again. "How did you do all this?" Sarah looked at him for a long moment, weighing her options. Her cover was blown. Sarah Chen, the quiet maintenance worker, couldn't have done what had just happened. But 12,000 lives were safe, and the immediate threat was over. "My name is Captain Jessica Hayes," she said. "Earth Defense Force Special Operations, and we need to talk." Security Chief Reynolds stared at Sarah in disbelief. Around them, the landing bay showed clear signs of a professional military operation. Scorch marks from plasma fire covered the walls. 2 saboteurs lay unconscious with their hands zip-tied behind their backs. And standing in the middle of it all was the quiet maintenance worker who had somehow become a trained soldier. "Captain Jessica Hayes," Reynolds repeated slowly. "I've never heard of you." "You wouldn't have," Sarah said. "My unit was classified above your clearance level. We handled situations that officially never happened." Reynolds holstered his weapon but kept his hand near it. "If you're really special operations, why are you working as a maintenance worker on a mining station?" Sarah checked her tablet. The alien ship was still approaching, though it would be hours before it arrived. But there might be other threats she hadn't detected yet. "Because Captain Hayes is supposed to be dead," she said. "Killed in action on a classified mission 18 months ago. Sarah Chen was born the day Jessica Hayes died." "What happened?" Sarah considered how much to tell him. The full story involved classified operations against alien insurgents, betrayal by someone in Earth Defense Command, and a mission that went catastrophically wrong. Most of it was still too sensitive to share. "My team was sent to investigate alien technology that was being used against human colonies," she said. "We discovered that someone in our own command structure was feeding information to hostile aliens. When we tried to report it, they tried to silence us permanently." "They tried to kill you?" "They succeeded with my team. I was the only survivor." Sarah's voice remained steady, but Reynolds could see the pain in her eyes. "I had no choice but to disappear. Sarah Chen was my chance to start over." Reynolds was quiet for a moment, processing what she had told him. Then he looked at the unconscious saboteurs. "And these two?" "Working for the Collective," Sarah said. "An alliance of alien species that wants to limit human expansion into space. They've been conducting sabotage operations against human installations for months." "How do you know all this?" Sarah showed him her tablet, which was displaying intercepted communications and technical readouts from the station's systems. "I've been monitoring their activities since I arrived. Tonight was supposed to be their final operation." Reynolds studied the information on the tablet. His security clearance wasn't high enough to understand all of the technical details, but he could see that the sabotage had been far more extensive than anyone had realized. "This is way beyond my authority," he said. "We need to contact Earth Defense Command immediately." "No," Sarah said firmly. "Someone in EDF Command is compromised. That's how my team was betrayed. If we report this through normal channels, the information will reach the wrong people." "Then what do you suggest?" Sarah checked her scanner readings. The alien ship was adjusting its approach vector, probably in response to the lack of communication from the saboteurs. It would arrive sooner than expected. "We need to prepare for an attack," she said. "The saboteurs were supposed to be extracted by an alien ship. When that ship arrives and finds them captured, they'll probably try to eliminate the evidence." Reynolds looked around the landing bay. "This station isn't equipped for military action. We're miners, not soldiers." "The station has defensive capabilities," Sarah said. "Mining lasers can be modified for combat use. Cargo bays can be sealed to create defensive positions, and you have 12,000 people who will fight to protect their home." "You're talking about war." "The war already started," Sarah replied. "The Collective has been attacking human installations for months. Tonight they plan to murder 12,000 innocent people. The only question is whether we fight back or let them win." Reynolds was quiet for a long time. Then he activated his communication device. "This is Security Chief Reynolds to Station Command. We have a code black situation. Hostile forces are approaching the station. All department heads report to the command center immediately." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Station Commander Walsh was a former military officer who understood the implications of Sarah's intelligence immediately. He declared a station-wide emergency and began implementing defensive measures. The mining lasers were recalibrated for long-range targeting. Emergency bulkheads were sealed to create defensive compartments. Maintenance crews began constructing improvised weapons and armor from industrial equipment. Sarah worked with the station's technical staff to enhance their sensor capabilities and communication systems. Her military-grade software gave them access to detection methods that could track stealth ships and intercept encrypted transmissions. At 0630 hours, they detected 3 ships approaching the station. The vessels were using advanced stealth technology and were armed with weapons that significantly outgunned anything the mining station could deploy. Collective assault ships, Sarah identified, fast, well-armed, and designed for quick strikes against civilian targets. Commander Walsh studied the tactical display. "Can we fight them?" "We can try," Sarah said. "But not with conventional tactics. Our only advantage is that they're not expecting organized resistance." The first ship entered weapons range at 0645 hours. Sarah had positioned herself in the station's command center, where she could coordinate the defense using her military training and access to advanced equipment. "Incoming transmission," reported the communications officer. "Put it through," Walsh ordered. The main screen showed an alien figure that Sarah recognized from intelligence briefings. A Zilithian, one of the collective's primary military species. The alien had gray skin, large black eyes, and features that seemed almost human until you looked closely. "Attention, mining station," the alien said in accented but clear English. "You are harboring criminals who have violated collective law. Surrender them immediately and your facility will be spared." Commander Walsh looked at Sarah. She shook her head slightly. "This is Commander Walsh," Walsh replied. "We know nothing about any criminals. If you have legal concerns, contact Earth Defense Command through proper diplomatic channels." The alien's expression didn't change. "You have 60 seconds to comply. After that, we will take the criminals by force." The transmission ended. "All hands to emergency stations," Walsh announced over the station's communication system. "This is not a drill. Hostile forces are preparing to board the station." Sarah activated the defensive systems she had prepared. Electronic jammers would disrupt the alien's sensors and communications. Modified mining equipment would provide makeshift weapons for the station's security teams. And hidden throughout the station were surprises that the collective forces wouldn't expect. The first assault ship docked with the station's outer ring at 0647 hours. Cutting tools began burning through the hull plating as alien soldiers prepared to board. "They're coming through Docking Bay 12, reported the security team. Sarah checked her tablet. Docking Bay 12 was exactly where she had expected them to attack. She had spent hours preparing that area for their arrival. "Let them board," she told Walsh. "Then seal the bay behind them." Walsh gave the order. The security teams pulled back from the docking bay, allowing the alien soldiers to enter the station unopposed. As soon as they were inside, emergency bulkheads slammed shut, trapping them in the bay. Then Sarah triggered her first surprise. The docking bay's atmospheric system had been modified to release a knockout gas that was designed specifically to affect Zilithian physiology. Within minutes, the entire boarding party was unconscious. "Boarding party neutralized," Sarah reported. But the aliens had learned from the first assault. The second ship approached a different docking port and began cutting through the hull with heavy equipment. This time, they were prepared for atmospheric weapons. "They're adapting to our tactics," Walsh observed. "Good," Sarah said. "That means they're taking us seriously." The second boarding party consisted of soldiers wearing environmental suits and carrying weapons designed for shipboard combat. They moved carefully through the station's corridors, expecting resistance. They found it in the form of mining crews armed with industrial equipment that had been modified for combat. Plasma cutters became deadly weapons. construction robots became mobile gun platforms. Even the maintenance staff fought with tools that could slice through armor plating. The battle for the station's outer ring lasted for 2 hours. The aliens were professional soldiers with superior equipment, but the humans were fighting for their homes and families. Every corridor became a battlefield. Every room became a fortress. Sarah coordinated the defense from the command center, using her knowledge of military tactics to direct the station's improvised forces. She identified weak points in the alien assault and sent reinforcements where they were needed most. The turning point came when the aliens tried to reach the reactor level. They needed to control the station's power source to force a surrender. But Sarah had anticipated this move. The reactor level had been turned into a killing field. Every access corridor was mined with explosives. Every ventilation shaft was monitored by sensors. And waiting in the reactor control room was Sarah herself, armed with military-grade equipment and 2 years of suppressed anger. The alien assault team consisted of 8 soldiers in powered armor. They moved through the reactor level with confidence, believing that their superior equipment would overcome any resistance. They were wrong. Sarah had fought collective forces before during classified operations that had never been reported. She knew their tactics, their weaknesses, and their equipment limitations. Most importantly, she knew that they underestimated human determination. The first alien soldier triggered a shaped charge that Sarah had hidden in a maintenance panel. The explosion didn't kill him, but it damaged his armor's sensors and slowed his advance. The second soldier walked into a trap that used the station's artificial gravity systems to slam him against the ceiling with enough force to crack his armor. The remaining 6 soldiers realized they were facing a professional opponent and began moving more carefully. But careful movement was exactly what Sarah wanted. Every second they spent in the reactor level was another second for the station's defenders to prepare. Sarah picked off the soldiers one by one, using the maze-like layout of the reactor level to her advantage. She struck from hiding, then disappeared before they could return fire. She used the environment as a weapon, turning the station's own systems against the invaders. The last alien soldier finally cornered her in the reactor control room. He was larger than the others and carried heavier weapons. His armor showed battle damage, but was still functional. "Surrender, human," he said in accented English. "Your resistance is futile." Sarah looked at him through the targeting scope of her plasma rifle. The alien was confident, professional, and completely unprepared for what came next. "You made 2 mistakes," she told him. "First, you underestimated how far humans will go to protect our own. Second, you assumed this was my first time fighting your people." Sarah triggered a device she had hidden in the reactor control panel. The reactor's magnetic containment field fluctuated for exactly 0.3 seconds, creating a pulse of electromagnetic energy that overloaded the alien's powered armor. The soldier collapsed as his armor's systems failed. Sarah zip-tied his hands and removed his weapons, then checked his condition. He was unconscious but breathing normally. Throughout the station, the battle was turning in favor of the human defenders. The aliens had expected to face frightened miners and maintenance workers. Instead, they found themselves fighting people who were willing to use any weapon, any tactic, any sacrifice necessary to protect their home. The third alien ship withdrew without attempting to board. The first 2 ships were captured along with their crews and equipment. By 1200 hours, the station was secure. Commander Walsh called a general assembly to address the station's population. 12,000 people crowded into the main auditorium to hear what he had to say. 12 hours ago, alien forces attacked this station with the intent of murdering every one of us," Walsh began. "They came here believing that humans are weak, that we would surrender rather than fight, that we would abandon our home rather than defend it." A murmur ran through the crowd. Many of the workers had never imagined that they would face alien attackers. "They were wrong," Walsh continued. "Today, every person on this station proved that humanity will not be intimidated. We will not surrender our right to exist in space. We will not abandon our families and our homes to alien aggression." The crowd erupted in cheers. Sarah watched from the back of the auditorium, still wearing the maintenance coveralls that had been her disguise for months. "But we could not have succeeded without the help of someone who sacrificed everything to protect us," Walsh said. "Someone who gave up her own identity to keep us safe. Captain Jessica Hayes, please come forward." Sarah hesitated. For months, she had been invisible, unknown, just another worker in the crowd. Now everyone was looking at her with recognition and respect. She walked to the front of the auditorium. The crowd parted to let her pass, and she could hear whispered conversations as people realized that the quiet maintenance worker had been something much more. "Captain Hayes infiltrated the sabotage operation that threatened our reactor," Walsh announced. "She identified the alien agents working against us. She coordinated our defense against overwhelming odds. She risked her life to save all of ours." The applause was thunderous. Sarah stood uncomfortably in the spotlight, wishing she could fade back into anonymity. But anonymity was no longer an option. Word of the battle would spread throughout human space. Earth Defense Command would investigate. The press would want to interview the hero of mining station Omega-7. Sarah Chen was about to disappear forever. After the assembly, Sarah returned to her quarters to pack her few belongings. There wasn't much to take. The clothes she had worn as a maintenance worker, a few personal items, the equipment that had revealed her true identity. A knock on her door interrupted her packing. She opened it to find Supervisor Martinez standing in the corridor. "So," he said, "Jessica Hayes." "I'm sorry I lied to you," Sarah said. Martinez shrugged. "You did good work, never complained, always pulled your weight." He paused. "That's all that mattered to me." "What happens now?" "That's up to you," Martinez said. "Commander Walsh has been in contact with Earth Defense Command. They want to debrief you about the alien threat, but they're also offering you a choice." Sarah waited. "You can return to active duty with a promotion and a commendation. Or you can stay here as our chief of security. The station council voted unanimously to offer you the position." Sarah was surprised. She had expected to be arrested or at least detained for investigation. The offer to stay was completely unexpected. "Why would they want me to stay?" "Because you kept us alive," Martinez said simply. "Because you understand threats that we don't even know exist. Because 12,000 people trust you with their lives." Sarah looked around her small room one last time. It had been a good life, even if it was built on a lie. Quiet, peaceful, safe. But safe was an illusion. The collective was still out there. Other alien forces might be planning attacks against human installations. Earth needed people who understood the threat and were willing to fight against it. "I'll need access to classified information," she said. "Direct communication with Earth Defense Command, and authority to implement security measures without going through bureaucratic channels." "Done," Martinez said. "And I'll need to recruit a team. People with military experience who can train the station's security forces. Whatever you need." Sarah made her decision. "Then I accept." 6 months later, mining station Omega-7 had become the most secure installation in human space. Sarah had transformed the facility from a vulnerable mining operation into a fortress capable of defending against any known alien threat. The station's security forces were trained to military standards. The defensive systems included both conventional weapons and experimental technology that Sarah had developed during her years in special operations. Most importantly, the station had become a training center where other installations could learn to defend themselves. Sarah stood in the command center, watching a tactical display that showed the positions of ships throughout the star system. Earth Defense Command had established a permanent fleet presence in the area, but the real security came from the network of defended stations that had learned from Omega-7's example. "Incoming transmission from Earth Command," reported the communications officer. "Put it through," Sarah said. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Admiral Chen, no relation despite the shared name. He was one of the few people who knew Sarah's full story. "Captain Hayes," the Admiral said, "I have news about the investigation into your original mission." Sarah tensed. For months, Earth Defense Command had been hunting for the traitor who had betrayed her team. The investigation had been slow and careful, but eventually they had found their target. "We arrested General Morrison this morning," Admiral Chen said. "He's been selling information to the collective for over 2 years. Thanks to your intelligence, we've also identified 12 other compromised officers." "What about my team?" Sarah asked. "They're alive," the Admiral said. "Morrison faked their deaths to cover his tracks. They've been in hiding just like you. I thought you'd want to know that they'll be returning to active duty next month." Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she hadn't realized she was carrying. Her teammates were alive. The traitor had been caught. The collective's intelligence network in Earth Defense Command had been destroyed. "There's something else," the Admiral continued. "The collective has requested a diplomatic meeting. They want to discuss terms for ending the conflict." "What kind of terms?" "They're willing to acknowledge humanity's right to expand into space with certain restrictions. In exchange, they want guarantees that we won't interfere with their own territorial claims." Sarah considered the implications. The collective had attacked because they believed humans were too aggressive and unpredictable to coexist with. The defense of Omega-7 had shown them that humans were also too stubborn and resourceful to be easily defeated. "What's your assessment?" the Admiral asked. "They're afraid of us," Sarah said. "The attack on this station was supposed to demonstrate that humans are vulnerable when we're spread out across space. Instead, it showed them that even a mining station can become a fortress when humans are threatened." "So you think the diplomatic offer is genuine?" "I think they're looking for a way to avoid a war they can't win," Sarah replied. "But I also think they'll try again if they believe we've become complacent." The Admiral nodded. "That's why we need people like you in positions where they can watch for threats. Will you consider returning to active duty?" Sarah looked around the command center. The crew working at the various stations were people she had trained personally. They were miners and maintenance workers who had become soldiers when they needed to defend their home. "I'm already on active duty," she said. "My mission is to make sure that what happened here never happens again, to prepare our people for threats they don't even know exist yet." "Then I'll make it official," the Admiral said. "Captain Hayes, you are hereby appointed Special Advisor for Colonial Defense. Your authority extends to any facility that requests your assistance." After the transmission ended, Sarah returned to her quarters. They were larger now, befitting her position as Chief of Security, but she had kept them simple and functional. The only decoration was a photo of her original Special Operations team. Soon she would see them again. They would want to know about the months she had spent as Sarah Chen, the quiet maintenance worker who had disappeared one day and been replaced by Captain Jessica Hayes. She would tell them about the hard work and simple satisfaction of keeping machinery running, about Supervisor Martinez, who had given her a chance when no one else would, about the miners who had fought aliens with improvised weapons because it was their home and their families under threat. Most of all, she would tell them about the lesson she had learned on mining station Omega-7. Humans didn't need to be the strongest or the most advanced species in the galaxy. They just needed to be the most determined. The collective had learned that lesson the hard way. Any other alien species that threatened humanity would learn it too. Sarah looked out the porthole at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there were other human colonies, other mining stations, other groups of people who thought they were safe in the vastness of space. They weren't safe. Safety was an illusion, but they didn't need to be safe as long as they were ready to fight for what mattered to them. And thanks to the example of mining station Omega-7, they would be ready. The quiet maintenance worker named Sarah Chen was gone forever. But the lessons she had learned during her months of hiding would live on in every human who refused to surrender to alien threats. Captain Jessica Hayes had work to do.